and who has been with us for the last 6 months, and she's pretty much the architect of these team thinking interventions. She's got a 20-year history in learning, workplace learning, sort of helping people change the way they do things, work with things, and she's helped a lot of the speakers develop some of these interventions and is sort of overseeing the whole process of it. So Bev, why team thinking interventions?
Well, I think, Ryan, perhaps what's really shifted for me, having been to so many conferences where I've heard so many speakers, is that I always leave the room thinking, what does this mean for me? And what does this mean for our company? And I think we've had an example just over the last half an hour or so to really actually unpack some of that stuff and to realize that there is so much wisdom in this room that has actually emerged, and we're not capturing it. And I think that in the conferencing space, it's almost been it's something that's been waiting to give birth, because we are now moving into a place where companies are going to much flatter organizational structures. We are asking people to be self-leaders. We are asking people to think for themselves, rather than being told what to think, which is very much the traditional paradigm. And so as we come into the conference room, we start saying, what if we could not only get the great message, because the thought leadership comes from the stage with the brilliant speakers that we put up there, but what if we could go away and say, what does this mean? What does this mean for us? And how can we bring this message into the strategy of our companies going forward? Just how much more powerful would our conferences be?
So we've spent the last hour or so doing this intervention, and there's some great. I'm sure those sheets of paper have incredible info on them, good intel for management. If we assume that everybody in the room was, say, working for a business, this was the credit division of a big bank, what happens with that? So everyone's made notes, great, so now what?
Well, I think there are two elements to team thinking which are really important for me. Is first of all to say, what is the business impact of the message? So that's what we discuss at the table, is to say, what does this mean for us? But then you want to be able to take that intelligence, and I use that word wisely, because it is intelligence you're taking back into the company and saying, how are we going to do things differently? You spoke about us moving from the traditional paradigm into the innovative paradigm. And we think that we've got to go and hire an expensive consultant to tell us how to be innovative. But you know where the innovation sits? With the people who are working with this stuff every day. And those are the people who are actually sitting in this room. If you want to know the best way to do something, go and ask for the person on the floor. Go and ask the person in the company. Go and ask the person who's actually dealing with the customer what it is that the customer needs. Rather than bringing in, there's one of my favorite books is Sorry I Broke Your Company, which is about how consultants come into a company and really use all sorts of wonderful business models to give you solutions that when they leave don't exist anymore. And I think that there's a real desire within companies to say, how do we increase the strategic value of us coming together, and then how do we take this past the lights going down on the conference and to say, let's really make this mean something, and taking it into the world of work and doing something differently. There's nothing more refreshing than having done the same thing over and over again and it's not working, to come away and say, wow, let's try it this way. But I think the other thing, and this is where I love the table discussion, is that sometimes you think you're the only person who's battling with that issue. And as you're listening to the speaker, you think to myself, oh yeah, that's my problem, but nobody shares that with me. And then you talk at the table and you realize that a whole lot of people, a whole lot of companies, different industries are experiencing exactly the same thing. And the power of that learning becomes exponential, and you take that back into your company and you start looking at the way that you do things differently.
So here's a hard question. It sounds amazing, but it also sounds very expensive. What is this doing to the budgets, the already constrained budgets of conference organizers?
Well, I think that's what excites me the most about the whole BBC concept generally, is that it's not about spending more. I mean, you spoke about those 12 speakers. I was speaking at a conference on last Friday, and I was the last of 8 speakers. And I was given the job of actually making people go home with some level of excitement. So, and it really was. I mean, by the 7th speaker, everybody is kind of feeling really heavy. And when we put our conferences together, we're putting them together with a very traditional paradigm. We make sure we have the dinner and the lunch and the gifts, and we'll have the speakers and the venue and all of that sort of thing. But I think the question that we're asking conference organizers and corporates who organize conferences, is there not a way of actually utilizing your conference budget more effectively? And I think that's what it's got to come down to, because in terms of return on investment, not only do we want to get more value in the conference, so what if you were to have one less speaker and have that time to unpack the message? Or you were to say, instead of having Johnny Walker Blue available to all of the staff, give them a beer and then...
What conferences have you been to, Bev?
I've been to a few, believe me. And on their 5th Johnny Walker Blue, they're useless to anybody anyway. But it's the kind of thing, you can have greater networking over a hot dog than you can over a gala dinner. Now, I'm not saying scrap the gala dinner, but what I'm saying is perhaps what you can do is that you can optimize the dinner and rather say, let's take some of that budget and put it into the power of the content coming out of the conference. And to be able to say, how do we take that to the next level, be it through team interventions or through videoing or through interviewing, and think about the intangible value as well. It's not only the cost of savings. When you interview the financial director, who normally would have his 40-page, heavily bulleted slides that he's kind of giving the message across to the organization. Instead, his message comes across in a new and a fresh way, which lands with the organization. They go away thinking about finances differently. You can't actually put a cash value to that, and yet it's part of the return on investment of the conference.
Well, I think, and I think you've raised a very important point in that it's not increasing the budget. It's okay, there is an existing budget when it comes to content. And what I've gotten excited about is from a Building Better conference point of view is that, speakers are content specialists. That's our thing. And we've had the privilege or not so much of being to a lot of conferences that have been some are good, some are poor, but you have conference organizers that are struggling to compensate for bad content. So the gala dinner has to be exceptional. The decor has to be out of this world. The entertainment needs to be really good to make up for a bad day of content. And that's where we see ourselves is how do we improve that? How do we get a better day out of that with the existing budget without saying spend another 150 grand or 300 grand? What have you got? Let's make something exceptional within that.
Absolutely. I think we also look at the delegate experience, because ultimately conferencing is about the experience.
Yes.
And I think that generally in my experience, both in training and in conferencing, the one thing that people generally remember is the food. Okay, sometimes not even the speaker. Sometimes they'll go back and they say the food was really good or the food was really lousy. Okay, the fact that Ryan just gave this awesome keynote becomes less. But ultimately, delegate experience is probably the one thing that we're really looking for. And I think the one thing that team thinking does is that delegates are given a voice. And we mustn't underestimate the value of that voice, because they will go away from that conference and they will go, wow. We were actually given an opportunity to participate in the conference rather than just be those rabbits in the headlight, the back of the room, literally just being spectators to the conference. So I think, that value, and whereas we're thinking that we've got to pay the extra amount per head for the gala dinner, at the end of the day, the wow factor is going to come from those delegates leaving the conference and saying, this was worth me taking 2 days out of the office.
Well, I think, again, a good point. In the few instances where I've been involved in these team thinking interventions, there are two great results from it, sort of almost measurable results. One is the delegate experience, the fact that people they have a voice, they've had an opportunity to discuss things, which is, as we know, is a fantastic aid in learning. And then the other is the intelligence being fed back. I mean, the value of the information that gets dispensed here. And as we go more technological, which we are planning to do today, was fairly sort of old school, low tech with a sheet of paper. But as we go in a way that information is captured in a way that can alter the course of a business, and they're thinking about where they thought they should be going and now where they really should be going. So, all right, so again, Bev, thank you very much. Bev has been the architect of our interventions, and there's a great future for them. So I think each of you will become familiar with Bev as you have conversations with her, and thank you very much for being there and help directing us in this new amazing direction.
Thank you, Ryan. And if I can perhaps just extend an invitation before I go, I think one of the most powerful parts of Build a Better Conference is the stage one, where USB actually wants to have the conversation with you at the conceptual stage of your conference, rather than the 2 weeks before when you've got to sign up the speaker. So we want to help speak into that brief. We want to really work with you to create the best possible content experience that you have. So the invitation is really to speak to the USB team. We have an awesome business development team there, ready to actually walk this journey with you. And I'd really just like to encourage people to take up that invitation.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Ron.
Bev, thank you very much.
Thank you.